Good afternoon. I'm Tricia Sinek, and I'm one of the speakers today for the Pierce County Cancer Survivor Conference. My talk today is called Eating for Survival, It Matters. I've been working in oncology for 27 years, and one of my favorite things to do is talk about this subject. So I'm glad you could join me today. We have a lot of information to cover in a very short period of time, so let's get going. So first of all, when you're going to do any job, you need the right tools. So if I'm going to do a job around my house, I need a toolkit. So if I'm going to hammer or in a nail or put up a picture, I need the right tools. So today I'm talking to you about the tools that you can use every single day to lead a long and healthy life after a cancer diagnosis. So we're going to talk about three things today. We're going to talk about the power of exercise and how important that is. I won't spend a lot of time on that because I'm not an expert, but I can tell you what some of the statistics tell us about staying moving after a cancer diagnosis. The second thing we're going to talk about is portion distortion and how important it is for you to get a good handle on what an appropriate portion size is. Because one of the key strategies for reducing your risk of cancer recurrence and leading a long and healthy life without other diseases is to get control over your weight and keep control over your weight for the remainder of your life. Every pound we gain increases our risk for cancer, for diabetes, for heart disease, and for dementia. So we're going to be talking about a simple strategy with portion control to help you have lifelong weight control. And the last thing that we're going to talk about, and we're going to spend most of our time talking about today, is the power of plants. We're going to be talking about foods that don't have mothers and why that's so important in your long-term cancer journey and staying well and reducing your risk of recurrence. So when I came to work in oncology 27 years ago as a dietitian, we really didn't know much about the power of plants or the power of food. Back in those days, the most important things we spoke about were vitamins and minerals that were found in fruits and vegetables and other plant foods, and we talked about antioxidants, but now we know so much more about that. So let's get started. First, let's talk a little bit about exercise and staying physically active after you've had a cancer diagnosis. We know that when we're physically active, our metabolic rate increases, and we burn fat, and it helps us to get rid of excess calories and also toxins in the body. So one thing we've learned now over the past several years is the more physically active you can be after a cancer diagnosis, the lower your risk of recurrence, in some cases by up to 60%. We know that in breast cancer, one of the most important things that you can do after that diagnosis is stay physically active and get fit and stay fit. Now, when you talk about this, people sometimes think, oh, I have to become a marathon runner or I have to do this or that. No, the bottom line is we want you moving 30 to 60 minutes a day intentionally. If that means that you go for a long walk or you go for a swim or you garden or you ride a bike or you go dancing, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you're physically moving. And that's because of all the metabolic impacts of moving that moving has on you. So it's critically important to do that, and there are other speakers here today that are talking about exercise and the power of staying fit and staying moving. We say if you don't move, you lose it, and we don't want you to lose your fitness, your agility, and your well-being, as well as the impact that has on reducing your risk of cancer recurrence. The next subject I want to talk about is portion distortion. We live in a culture where everywhere we go, we're served too much to eat. And every time we go to someone's house, we're served too much to eat. And now with COVID, the COVID pandemic, a lot of us are staying home and we're not out and about doing as much as we did before. So many people have gained weight with the COVID pandemic. I'm one of them, I must confess, and I'm very distressed about it. So one of the things that we can do that really makes a difference for us over the long term in terms of our health and well-being is to get control over the portion sizes of what we eat. So I want to show you a simple strategy for keeping track of your portion size. This is a paper plate, and what we say is that your hands are the right size for your body frame and your size. So if you would put your two hands together and flatten them out and put your thumbs in. If you're a small person, you have small hands. If you're an average sized person, you have average hands. And if you're a large person or an extra large person, you have extra large hands. And so we say that the hands are the guide to portions that work for you. So what does that mean? I'm an average sized person and I have average sized hands. So this is the size of an entire meal for me. If you're a larger person, your hands are bigger, you can eat a larger meal. If you're a smaller person, your hands are smaller and you need to eat a smaller meal. So we're going to talk about portion size. So this is a typical paper plate, and I'm going to show you what the portion size means. So if I put my hands on this plate and I draw around the circumference of my hands, you can see that my hands don't fill up this plate. That means that when I go to eat a meal, it shouldn't cover this plate and it shouldn't go over the border or the perimeter of this plate. So this is the size of a meal for me. So this is a meal for me, and you can do the same thing with a paper plate or one of your plates. This is a meal for me, this is a snack for me. Whatever fits in the cupped portion of one of my hands, leveled. So if we look at this plate and we divide it in 4, just like this, very simply, this is what my meal should look like. So this should be my starch, my potato, my pasta, my rice, or my bread. Not and. So that's a 4-ounce portion is what a standard portion is. So what does that look like? I'll show you in just a second. Then we need our protein. That should take up 1/4 of our plate space. And this side of our plate should all be fruits and veggies. So these can take up half the plate. And actually, I'm not worried about what's on this side of the plate. I'm worried about what's on this side of the plate. Because if we overeat starches, especially simple starches, and we overeat protein, especially animal protein, this is what helps lead to obesity or weight gain as we get older. If you overeat fruits and vegetables, you don't tend to gain as much weight as you do if you overeat these things. So what does half a cup of a starch look like? So what I did is I bought these cheap little portion control cups at the grocery store, and this is half a cup of mashed potatoes. So I want you to see what that physically looks like on the plate. So that is half a cup of mashed potatoes. And actually it looks like quite a bit on this plate, and I'm going to smash it down. That's what half a cup of mashed potatoes looks like, and that's a serving of starch. So we'd want about that much or a little bit smaller amount of animal protein or protein on our plate, and then half our plate should be fruits and vegetables. Now keep in mind that's half a cup of mashed potatoes, but if I told you that's all the spaghetti you can eat or all the pasta you can eat, you probably wouldn't be very happy with that. So that is a 4-ounce portion. And if you go to Olive Garden, it's not uncommon for you to be given 32 ounces of pasta, almost 2 pounds of pasta on your plate. So we want you to be consciously thinking about the portion size everywhere you go. So I recommend that you buy these inexpensive, small little Ziploc containers at the grocery store, and you start carrying one with you. This is a half a cup container. And start carrying it till you get comfortable with what that kind of a portion looks like. And you'll find that if you really are faithfully following those portion guides every single day at every single meal, that it's very, very easy to control your body weight. Because the average person in the United States is used to eating such large portions that we would consume about 1,300 calories a day less if we use this as a portion guide. And that's a pretty simple way to control your weight the rest of your life, especially if most of what's on your plate, if 3/4 of what's on your plate does not have a mother, if it's a plant-based food. So we're going to be talking about plants. So think about your plate and think about 75% or 3/4 of your plate being covered with foods that don't have mothers. What do I mean when I say that? That sounds like a kind of a crazy thing. So I'll talk about that a little bit more. So over the past 20-some years, we've learned quite a bit about diet and cancer. And one thing we've learned is that plants are the most powerful thing that you can eat to reduce your risk of cancer to begin with, to prevent some cancers from growing or spreading, and also to reduce the risk of recurrence after you've had a cancer diagnosis. So I think about it like this. Foods either promote the growth of cancers or they help to prevent or slow down or stop the growth of cancers. So what are the foods that promote the growth of cancers? Well, the three things that we really talk about a lot in terms of promoting cancer, and I call these foods Miracle Grow for tumors. That's why I have a bottle of Miracle Grow on this table with all these beautiful foods. So when we think about foods that promote metabolically the growth of cancers, those are foods that I consider Miracle Grow. So they allow cancers to grow more readily. So what are those foods and why do they do that? These are foods that cause changes in your internal inflammatory proteins, your hormones, and your enzymes. And if foods promote inflammation inside the body, then those are foods that act like Miracle Grow for tumors. So what are the foods that do that? Well, there's three primary groups of foods that do promote the growth of tumors. One of them is meat, especially red meat and cured meats. So this is bacon, and it's uncured bacon. So if you're going to eat bacon, uncured is a good choice. But red meat, so meats that come from animals that have 4 legs. So there's 3 kinds of animals, well there's more I guess, that we typically eat in our society that have 4 legs. So cows have 4 legs, so they produce beef. And so beef comes from a 4-legged animal, and beef can promote the growth of tumors. The second animal that has 4 legs is a pig. So the pork that we eat can promote the growth of tumors. Lamb has 4 legs, and so a sheep has 4 legs, and so lamb can promote the growth of tumors. And goats have 4 legs, and they're red meat, and they can promote the growth of tumors. Now, if those red meats are processed, in other words, if they've been cured or smoked or processed in some way, like most bacon, like ham, then those foods are even more skilled at promoting the growth of tumors inside the body. So one of the recommendations for cancer survivors is to reduce your intake of red meat after you've had a diagnosis of cancer, and to avoid processed red meats like bologna and ham and bacon and lunch meats, because they are powerful promoters of the growth of tumors inside the body. So the recommendation from the American Institute of Cancer Research is that after you've had a cancer diagnosis, or a recipe. And in terms of nuts, there's several things I do. This is one of my favorite things to do. This is just ground almonds. I buy it at Trader Joe's, and I use it for all my baking. So I use half flour and half ground almonds for all my baking. And I make pancakes with it, and I make waffles with it. So that's an easy way to get more nuts in your diet. And I also make, whenever I bake, I add a lot more nuts than the recipe calls for. So if a recipe calls for a cup of nuts, I tend to add 2 cups of nuts, because that helps displace some of the other things in baked goods that aren't as good for us, like our butter and like our sugars. So I make my baked goods with a higher density of nuts. The other thing that you can do with nuts that's just fantastic, you can make a beautiful salad with arugula and red cabbage and red onions and all these beautiful healthy vegetables. And then I like to take some nuts and I put them in a pan on top of the stove, and I put a tiny, tiny bit of water, a tiny bit of brown sugar, and then whatever spices or seasonings. I like to put a little chili powder. So I make like a sweet, hot, caramelized pecans or walnuts, and then I let those